Start doing that.
All right, we back?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Weird. All right. Proverbs chapter 21. Y'all there?
Yep.
Okay. Proverbs 21. Let's get started. Says the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. Right? So, I mean, this one, the king's heart, the person in charge, right? His heart is a waterway in the hand of God is another way that it's said. You know, the king's heart is a waterway in the hand of the Lord. He directs it to whom he pleases, or whomsoever pleases him is another way of interpreting this. But you know, the in order for this to be true, the king's heart has to be in God's hand, right? So the king's heart is a waterway of blessing if the king's heart is in God's hand. If the person knows the Lord, follows the Lord, then he is a blessing. He is a waterway of blessing to others, is really what this says. And he turns that blessing, he turns that king's heart wherever he wishes. I guess the thing that, you know, jumped out at me here was I really got to start drinking hot tea in the morning. I think that's going to help me instead of cold water, which doesn't help. Anyway, you know, the Lord, the heart that the Lord rules, right? The heart that the Lord rules is a waterway for God's blessing, is a pathway for God's blessing. So I think that it's not only the king here, but all of us, right? Where the Lord rules our heart, he uses us as a waterway of blessing to others. Your heart, you are a blessing to others if your heart is in the Lord's hand, I think is what I'm trying to say. You are to be a blessing to others. You know, the king's heart, your heart, right, is turned by the Lord, and he turns it to whoever he wishes to bless. You are to be that same way. All right, verse 2. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the hearts. So we've talked about this one before. We had this one previously, right? But, you know, there are those people that are all about themselves. You know, his way is right. He knows what's right. He's not listening to anybody else, right? But what's interesting here is connecting this to verse 1. You know, God weighs the heart and therefore determines how to direct that waterway, how to direct that blessing. He weighs your heart. He weighs the king's heart, and therefore directs his blessing towards those that need that blessing, depending upon your heart, depending upon how right your heart is. He weighs it. Verse 3. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. So, again, you know, we read these and I'm afraid that we take away from it that sacrifice is not good. And that's not what he's saying. He's not denigrating sacrifice. But what he's trying to do is highlight righteousness and justice, right? This is what pleases God, righteousness and justice. And this is what the Lord weighs also, right? Back to verse 2. What he's weighing is the righteousness and justice in your heart. And so what he's saying here is, you know, do righteousness and justice. That's more important than sacrifice, more important than the things that you do, more important than the things that you sacrifice for him is, are you being righteous and are you being just? And I think what he's trying to get to in this verse is, are you using your quote sacrifice as a cover for unrighteousness and injustice? Right? Do you have unrighteousness in your life and you're saying, well, yeah, but I'm sacrificing. Yeah, I'm doing this really good thing. I'm doing this stuff for God, so therefore he's going to overlook that unrighteousness or that injustice in my life. And he's saying here, no, no, no. Righteousness and justice, way more important than sacrifice, way more important than the stuff that you do for God or that you think you're doing for God is righteousness and justice. Again, it's about obedience, right? That's what pleases God, righteousness and justice, not the stuff you do. Verse 4. A haughty look, a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked are sin. So haughty look, proud heart, we know what that does. But this thing about the plowing of the wicked, anybody have another translation for the second part of verse 4?
The lamp of the wicked is sin.
The lamp. Anybody else? So what's interesting here is that if you go back to the original Hebrew, it really says an unplowed field leads to sin. An unplowed field of the wicked. And I think what it's trying to get to there is these are people who have not thought it through, who have not plowed the field, who have not dug deep to find out what is true and what is not true. And so they have no moral compass. They have no direction. They're just kind of bouncing along in whatever feels good. There's no instruction, and that leads to sin. It's an unplowed seed. The plowing or the unplowing of the wicked leads them to sin because they don't actually think it through. They're haughty, they're proud, they know it all, they don't have to think it through, and that leads to sin. I think that's really what's trying to be said here. Verse 5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty. Right? So again, one of the translations says the thoughtfulness of the diligent. Right? The thinking things through, not just jumping in, not just being hasty, right? It leads to poverty, or it leads to the things that are essential for life by being diligent and planning and thoughtful. And of course, this is not just about money, right? This is about life. The plans, the thoughtfulness, the thinking it through of the diligent lead to abundant life, is what it's really saying, verse 5. Verse 6, getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death, right? So the hasty that we've just been talking about here, he's connecting them to the lying tongue. It's mine says it's a fleeting fantasy or a windblown breath. And so what's interesting, right, is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death. By seeking this fleeting fantasy, by getting treasure by a lying tongue, what you're actually doing is seeking death. And and just to pause a minute, I mean, this is why we need to step in and help, right? Because these people don't realize, with the lying tongue, with the fleeting fantasy, what they're actually doing is seeking death. What they're actually doing is going after the end, which is death. And so it's our job to help them, to see that the lying tongue and the fleeting fantasy are not what it's all about. Verse 7, the violence of the wicked will destroy them because they refuse to do justice, right? So the same is true of the violent. The violence of the wicked will destroy them or will catch them. I think again, in the Hebrew, it's more about they get caught in their own net, as we've talked about before, right? The boomerang effect of the violence of the wicked will destroy themselves. They'll be destroyed by their own violence because they refuse to seek justice, because they refuse to seek the Lord, right? And again, I think these folks had a chance to do it right. They had a chance to do something but they refused to do justice. And we've talked about this before. These folks just seek after evil and refuse to do what's right, refuse to follow after the Lord. Verse 8, the way of a guilty man is perverse, But as for the pure, his work is right. The way of a guilty man is perverse. The way of the hasty man, the liar, the violent man, all those men that we've just talked about is perverse, is crooked. It deviates from the Proverbs, if you will. The way of this guilty man, this man that we've just talked about in the last 3 verses, right, will lead to that. And then it says, but as for the pure, his work is right. As for the pure, I just wanted to pause a minute. It just kind of, when we say the pure, and you can certainly go all the way back to, Matthew chapter 5, right? Blessed are the pure in heart. What does it mean to be pure? But as for the pure, his work is right. What does pure mean?
We think for the right reason.
Okay,
Living righteously.
good. Any other thoughts?
When you first said pure, I thought about being sinless, but we would not be included in that. So it's doing what's right, even in your sinful nature, I guess. Being holy is the definition of that, set apart from sin.
It's good. Taking us back to, again, to Matthew chapter 5, right? What's the result of blessed on the pure heart? Blessed are the pure in heart. Everybody remember?
They should see God. Isn't it?
That part.
Yeah, they shall see God. Blessed are the pure in hearts, for they shall see God. They shall. It's interesting here. Certainly, that's talking about they shall see God in the end, right? They will go and live with God, all of that. But I think it also says they shall see God now, right? They can see God working. They can see God acting. They see God in all things. The pure in heart see God all the time. They always see God. I do want to flip through some verses for a minute. I just got stuck on this word, so bear with me. James chapter 1. You can either follow along or I can just read them. But just this, James chapter 1, verse 27. Right, James chapter 1, verse 27 says, pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. Right? To visit orphans and widows in trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted in the world. So there's both an active part there, right, to visit orphans and widows, and then there's a keep one from sin, keep oneself unspotted in the world. While we're in James, go to chapter 3, verse 13. It says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his words are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace to those that make peace. This connection between wisdom and purity, I just thought it important that we get that as we're reading this whole book on wisdom. It says, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, right? It's not envious, it's not self-seeking, not boasting, not lying. We can, because We could take this wisdom and these proverbs and do the I'm better than you thing, right? I know more than you do. I've got it all together and you don't. But the wisdom from above is first pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. There's a purity to the wisdom that we're supposed to have. And of course, just to remember, last week we looked at Psalm 51:10, right? Create in me a clean heart, or the word clean is actually the same as the word that we're looking at here, pure. Create in me a pure heart, right? The only way we actually get this pure heart is that God creates this in us. I do want you to look at Titus chapter 1. Titus in the T section. Titus chapter 1. I'm having trouble finding it. There it is. Titus chapter 1, verse 15. It says, to the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but even their mind and conscience are defiled. So I think this goes back to this idea that to the pure, all things are pure. To the pure, they see purity. They see God, right? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. They see God in all things. They see purity. They don't look at things and go, oh, what a mess that is. No, they see God. They see where God is working. They see what God is doing. They're they're not always griping about what's going on in the world and what's happening and what a mess things are. No, they see God at work. They see what God's doing. Their focus is on what God is doing, on the positive that God is making happen, rather than on the negative stuff that's all around them. To the pure, all things are pure. And then one more in Romans chapter 14. Romans chapter 14, verse 20. Romans 14:20, mine says, do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. All things indeed are pure, but is evil for a man who eats with offense. We're talking here about, what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. Some things are clean, some things are unclean. But this is interesting, right? Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. All things indeed are pure, but it's evil for the man who eats with offense. Right? So we tend to take offense, and we've talked about taking offense before, right? And he's saying that the opposite of being pure is taking offense. The opposite of looking at all things that are pure, that God has created. God has created all things. God has created all things, and they're therefore pure, but we have uglified them. It's a new word I just made. Right? We look at them and see different things. We abuse them, the things that God has made. But to the pure, all things are pure. I just think there's a mindset that we need to have as Christians to the world, because they don't see God at all. All they're seeing is the dirt and the smut and the crud around them. But we, to the pure, all things are pure. We see the pure. We see God. We see God at work. We see the things that he's doing. And we're supposed to reflect those to the world. The world can only see them through us. And if we're just like the world, just seeing the mess, seeing the problems, complaining about what's going on, and focusing on that, they don't see God. They miss him because we're not showing him to them. Verse wherever we are. Verse 9, back in Proverbs. Better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house share with a contentious woman. See, these are the ones that just get me in trouble.
Yeah.
So, so while we're here, skip over to verse 19, right? Better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman, right? So, in verse 9, better to dwell in the corner of a housetop. He's really saying there, if you remember, in the housetop in the houses in those days were essentially an open platform, right? They would go up there when it was hot to get cooled off. But at night, you wouldn't want to be up there because you're exposed to the elements. And that's really what it's trying to say here. Better to dwell in the corner of a housetop where you're exposed to the elements, where you can get rain and snow on top of you. Or in verse 19, better to dwell in the wilderness, right, than in the house with a contentious and an angry woman. This just takes us back to chapter 18, right? He who finds a good wife finds a good thing from the Lord, right? The other thing just to add is, right, be careful what you say to your spouse. Say what you say to your spouse, you're saying before God. Better to live in the corner of a housetop than to share with a contentious woman. We'll just leave it there. Verse 10.
Maybe he's the reason he's contentious.
Well,
Ah.
Actually, Rich,
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Can you speak up?
I've got a note on that verse in my Bible that adds some clarity to that. It says, the wise husband will reflect on what aspects of his behavior have led his wife to become quarrelsome.
Yeah. Moving on to verse 10. So, yeah, we talked about this, when we talked about this kind of verse before, right? I mean, this is marriage is a two-way street and a two-party problem. And these things don't happen by themselves.
Maybe
Verse 10. Go ahead.
Maybe use that new our discussion today, and that's why you had to get permission for everybody to have audio and video.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? Verse 10. The soul of the wicked desires evil. His neighbor finds no favor in his eyes, right? And we just talked about this a few minutes ago, that they desire evil. They love evil. Back in chapter 4, you'll remember we had a verse that said they can't sleep until evil is done. I do want you to look over at Ecclesiastes. It's the next book over, Ecclesiastes chapter 8. Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 11. Verse 11 says, because the sentence against evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Right? So this is the explanation. The sons of men are fully set to do evil because the sentence against them is not executed speedily. Right? They may not get theirs till the end. They're going to get theirs, but may not get it to the end. And so they're focused on evil. The soul of the wicked desires evil. All right, verse 11. When the scoffer is punished, the simple is made wise. But when the wise is instructed, he receives knowledge. We saw a similar verse back in chapter 19, verse 25, if I remember. And the question here is, how do the uncommitted, right? So notice in the first part, the simple is made wise, or the uncommitted. Remember, it's the same word. The uncommitted is what made wise. He's saying, how do the uncommitted learn? How do the uncommitted learn? The Proverbs learn about the Lord. It's in two ways. One is when the scoffer is punished, right? When the scoffer gets theirs, they learn from that. The second way is from the wise, right? From the discernment of the wise, when the wise is instructed. So the uncommitted can learn in two ways, either getting bopped on the head or actually paying attention to wisdom. And that's what he's trying to say here. Verse 12. The righteous of God wisely considers the house of the wicked, overthrowing the wicked for their wickedness. It's interesting here in the commentaries, there's two completely different interpretations of this verse. In my Bible, it says the righteous God wisely considers the house of the wicked, but the word God is in italics, which means it was added by the the person who wrote this version. So, what does yours say for 12a?
That says righteous one, and righteous and one are both capitalized.
Yeah. Is yours the same, Debbie?
Mine says the righteous one considers the house of the wicked, but it's not capitalized.
Yeah. So in the Hebrew, it just says the righteous, and the implication is the righteous one, and it's unclear whether this is talking about God. Mine inserts the word God. The righteous one as God considers the house of the wicked, or it's just talking about the person who is righteous. The righteous person considers the house of the wicked. It's unclear. But the point is, whether if it's God, then, obviously he considers the house of the wicked, and it goes right back to, the scoffer is punished, the punishment will come upon them. That could certainly what it means here. If it talks about the righteous, it is talking about God. He considers the house of the wicked and overthrowing the wicked, right? He's responsible for overthrowing the wicked in their wickedness. That could certainly be what this is saying. Or it's that the righteous person considers the house of the wicked and recognizing that he's going to be overthrown. That wickedness will be overthrown. He's smart enough to know that they're going to get theirs, right? That in the end, wickedness is not going to pay off. So you can take this, you can interpret this in either way, as the commentaries have done.
Rich, the second half of mine starts with he, and the he is not capitalized. So it's kind of, it leaves it for question which one it's speaking about. That he brings the wicked to ruin. But again.
Yeah, there's no he in the Hebrew. That's been added by the scribe here. Yeah. All right, verse 13. Whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be heard. Now, this connects us to a lesson we had a couple of weeks ago about the poor, right? But whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor, back in verse 20, we talked about the seeing eye and the hearing ear, right? If you shut it to the poor, in the end, he will cry out and not be heard. And again, this connects us back to the verses a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the merciful, right? Blessed are the merciful. Do you remember what the merciful get? Wait, we're going to have to go back to Matthew chapter 5 and do that again.
Merciful. Tattoos.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy, right? And I think that's what he's saying here. Whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor, he himself will not be heard. He will not receive mercy. Again, if you remember that, the interpretation of that was if you show mercy, that if you show mercy to others, it shows that you understand the mercy that you have received from God. Verse 14. A gift in secret pacifies anger, a bribe behind the back, strong wrath. So it's interesting here in that it says a gift in secret pacifies anger, and a bribe behind the back, strong wrath. So it pacifies anger, it pacifies strong wrath, but it actually doesn't solve the issue, right? It makes you feel better. If you bribe someone, you give him a little gift, right, such that he doesn't do. This is mainly in the venue of a court. Is the way this is talking about here. But the idea is, right, that this is just something you can do, something in order to pacify, in order to make you feel better, but it doesn't actually solve the issue. It doesn't actually solve what the real problem is. Why is the anger there? What is the wrath about? You've actually got to deal with that and not just pacify it by giving a gift and by washing it over. Verse 15. It is a joy for the just to do justice, but destruction will come to the workers of iniquity. It's a joy for the just to do justice. Why is it a joy for the just to do justice? What does that mean? Why is it a joy?
Just is. It's kind of like it comes naturally. Or when you're doing that, when you're doing justice, it just has that, you can just have that.
You're doing what God wants you to do.
Overflow.
Yeah, I would say you're being like God, right? And there's a joy for being like God. I think it's exactly what you said. There's a joy in that. We're gonna revisit this verse when we get down to verse 18. But there's a joy for the just to do justice. There's a joy when justice is done, right? There's a joy when we see justice done. If you look at the second half, verse 15, but destruction will come to the workers of iniquity. There's a joy when destruction comes to the workers of iniquity, right? When we see in the end that that God does what he says he's going to do with the wicked, when justice happens to them. Those two things are connected. All right, verse 16. The man who wanders from the way of understanding will rest in the assembly of the dead. This is a pretty strong word, right? The man who wanders from the way of understanding, from the way of wisdom, from the way of these proverbs, will rest in the assembly of the dead. He's certainly among those who are spiritually dead now, and he is resting in that assembly. He's resting with the rest of those who are spiritually dead, who wanders from these proverbs, who doesn't pay attention to this wisdom, who doesn't know Christ, right, will rest in the assembly of the dead. Harsh word. Verse 17. He who loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. Right? He who loves pleasure, and they're connecting that with wine and oil, right, will be a poor man, will not be rich. He spends all his money, spends all his time on pleasure. So his focus is there instead of on the Lord. His focus is there instead of on these proverbs. He loves wine and oil, will not be rich. And it really, when it says he will be, it really means he is, right? He who loves pleasure is a poor man. It's not that that's something that comes. He's poor because he doesn't have life, because he doesn't have the true riches. He's poor. He may think he's rich. He may think, well, I got wine, I got oil, I'm good. No, he is poor. He is not rich. Is really what it's saying in the pure Hebrew. Verse 18. So the wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the unfaithful for the upright. We saw it similar. Go back to chapter 11 a minute. We saw another verse like this. Chapter 11, verse 8. It says, the righteous is delivered from trouble, and it comes to the wicked instead. If you remember that verse. The righteous are a ransom for the wicked. Excuse me, the wicked shall be a ransom for the right. Read the whole thing backwards. The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous. I'm back in verse 18 now. And the unfaithful for the upright. In what way are the wicked a ransom for the righteous? How can they be a ransom? No idea?
Said, can you go back to where it says, I'm the vine, you're the branches, and if you don't bear any fruit, the branches are cut off and thrown in the fire. So the righteous or the wicked are winning the wicked to Christ are bearing fruit. Oh, he doesn't like
I
that.
don't, I'm trying to think that through, Bill. It's not where I was going, but I'm just trying to think of that, how that makes sense. I'm not getting it, but doesn't mean it's wrong, just because I don't get it. The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous. Let me ask you the question this way. What do the righteous deserve?
Death.
Yeah. And see, I think all this is saying is that the wicked take the place of the righteous.
Yeah.
Right. In the way that of a ransom, right? It's not that they pay for it in the sense that Christ does, right? But I think he's using the word here to say they take the place of the righteous. Instead of the righteous being condemned, instead of the righteous, being crushed, the wicked will be. They're going to take their place. And so that takes us back to verse 15, right? And this is so the justice, i.e., the wicked getting theirs instead of the righteous getting theirs, right, is the joy, right? It's a joy for the just to do justice. It's a joy for justice to happen, i.e., that the wicked will be a ransom for the righteous. The wicked will take the place of the righteous. The wicked will be condemned into everlasting hell, and the righteous will not. I think that's the connection between them. Verse 19. Okay, 19 we've already dealt with. We're not going to do it again.
Smart man.
Because we'll just make somebody angry. By the way, while I'm here, I am looking for someone to teach Proverbs 31 for me, i.e., a female person. So if you are interested and you are a female person, or if you know someone who would be good for us to bring in to teach Proverbs 31, I would love to hear that. Because I don't think it's appropriate for me to teach Proverbs 31. Because I'll have the same trouble I'm having with verse 19. All right, verse 20. There is desirable treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man squanders it, right? The treasure and oil, their storehouses are full of oil, and the wise use their resources and don't squander them. The foolish consume them, is what's really saying. They consume them in gluttony. They consume all the things that come to them, their treasure, and really this verse is more focused on food and oil. It is not talking about money. It's talking about the things that they have, that they squander them and waste them rather than utilize them. And again, what would be the correct use of the treasure and the oil that the wise would do? What would the wise do with their treasure and their oil? I didn't hear you.
Use it sparingly.
Yes.
And use
And-
it, they can use it to bless those
They
less
give it-
fortunate than themselves.
Yeah, use it to bless others, right? Instead of using it as the foolish one does, he squanders it. He uses it on himself. He's gluttony with it. The wise man would use it for others. He would share it. He would use it to move God's God's causes forward. Verse 21. He who follows righteousness and mercy finds life, righteousness, and honor. Anybody have different words there? I'm just curious. Mine says, he who follows righteousness and mercy finds life, righteousness, and honor.
Mine says he who pursues righteousness and loyalty.
Loyalty, okay?
Mine says righteousness and love.
Okay, good.
Love,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
faithful love.
Faithful? A
love.
faithful love. Okay, good. Yeah, it's a rich word, that second word, and the commentaries had trouble figuring out how to. Faithful love is a good one. How to actually translate it. But he who follows righteousness and mercy, righteousness and love, he who follows them, in other words, he who does the Proverbs, he who follows these teachings, and by the way, it follows is an active word. He pursues it. He goes after it. This loving kindness, loving devotion, faithfulness. He finds, or he gains, or he attains life, righteousness, and honor. Life, righteousness, or justice, and honor could be abundance or glory. I find this to be a really powerful verse. He who follows righteousness, so he who is righteous and loving, righteous and kind, he will find life, righteousness, and honor. So, so again, this is what life is about. You want to have a good life, you want to have an abundant life, you want to have an amazing life, then pursue righteousness and loving devotion. Pursue righteousness and loving devotion. Then you get back righteousness and honor, and you also get back life. This is, it's like, isn't this enough reason to follow Christ right here? Isn't this enough reason to listen to the Proverbs right here? That you get life, righteousness, and honor. Oh, to me, it's a great summary verse of what this teaching is really all about. Follow righteousness, follow the Proverbs, follow Christ, follow loving kindness, find life, righteousness, and honor. Okay, verse 22. Verse 22, we referred to last week when we looked at spiritual warfare, right? A wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the trusted stronghold, right? So again, I would just say this is this active soldier, right? The wise man who actually scales the city of the mighty, who brings down the strongholds, who does the work, who does the fight against the strongholds, against evil. That's what's expected. That's a wise man who does that. Verse 23, whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from trouble, right? We've talked about the mouth a lot, but guard your mouth and it will guard your soul. Guard what comes out, guard the things you say, and it will guard your soul. It'll keep your soul from trouble. Keep your heart from trouble. Verse 24. A proud and haughty man, scoffer is his name. He acts with arrogant pride. Scoffer is his name, right? And we've said many times before that the name carries the character, right? And so they're saying that this proud and haughty man, we're going to call him scoffer. We're going to call him proud. We're going to call him haughty because all he does is act with arrogant pride. Verse 25, the desire of the lazy man kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. The desire of the lazy man, what is the desire of the lazy man?
Do nothing, be lazy.
His desire is not to do anything, right? And that laziness, that desire kills him. And I just got to keep reminding us because I think we get these things messed up in our head. This is not the poor man. This is the lazy man, right? It's the lazy man, and it ends up killing him. He does not have life, right? He does not have that abundant life. It kills him because his hands refuse labor. His hands refuse to actually do it. And then look at 26 to connect this. He covets greedily all day long, but the righteous gives and does not spare. So this lazy man covets greedily all day long. He wants it, right? But the problem is in the second half, the righteous gives and does not spare, right? The lazy man wants it, desires it, covets it, but the righteous, he gives. He doesn't talk about what he gets, right? It talks about what he gives. And the lazy man is all about what he gets. This is the big difference between the righteous, between the righteous and the lazy man, between the righteous and the wicked man, right? The one covets and is lazy, and his hands refuse labor, and the other one gives and does not, when it does, mine says does not spare, does not keep from giving. It gives without restraint is what that really is saying. I'm pausing because I need to go back and have a longer discussion on giving. And we'll come back to that another day because I'm sure we're going to hit it again here in Proverbs. Okay, verse 27. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. How much more when he brings it with wicked intent. So again, he's not here speaking against sacrifice. He's speaking against sacrifice of the wicked, right? Sacrifice with a wicked intent. So this is the hypocritical worshiper, right? Why are you worshiping? Why are you sacrificing? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And if you know that you are doing it with wicked intent, that's even worse, right? If you're an ignorant hypocrite, that's one thing. But if you're a hypocrite who does it intentionally, that's even worse, is what he's trying to say here. But again, I will ask the question, why are you sacrificing? You know, some of us may think, well, you know, I have to come to church on Sunday. I sacrifice my Sunday. I don't get to go play golf. I don't get, I don't get to do the things that the wicked get to do. That's what a great sacrifice that is of mine, right? And the question I would say is, how do you think about the things that you do? The things that you do for God, how do you think about them? Do you think about them as a sacrifice? Do you think about them as something you're doing for God? The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. Okay, I think you got it. Verse next, 28. A false witness shall perish, but the man who hears will speak endlessly. The wicked, the false witness will perish. Again, it takes me back to that verse 16, right? Will rest in the assembly of the dead. These are harsh words that you're saying here. A false witness will perish. A false witness will die. A false witness will not have life, right? If you want to put it that way. But he who hears, who listens, who pays attention will be successful, will be valuable. That's what the second part says. The man who hears, who listens. So mine says the man who hears him, but the word him is in italics. It really shouldn't be there because it really means the man who hears, as opposed to the false witness who doesn't hear. He doesn't listen. He's just giving his own opinion. But it really is saying the man who hears, the one who does listen, he will speak endlessly. He will speak something of value. He will say something that's useful. That's what it's trying to get across. Verse 29. I will say too, just as I study these Proverbs, I read them the first time and I go, oh, I think I know what that means. And then I study them and I go, oh, it actually means exactly the opposite of what I thought it meant. And this is one of those verses. So, yeah, it's worth the study. Verse 29, a wicked man hardens his face, but as for the upright, he establishes his way. The wicked hardens his face. The wicked man puts on a false face, right? He's confident looking. He knows what he's doing, right? He's proud. He's haughty. But the upright, he establishes his way. He makes sure of his way. He plans his way. And his way is, his as for the upright, he establishes his word, his testimony, he makes sure all of it is right. Whereas the wicked man just has a hard face and just says, I know I'm right. I know I'm good. I know everything's fine. And is not willing actually to even have a conversation about it. I know I'm right. Don't challenge me on that. But the man who hears, as in verse 28, right, establishes his way, makes sure of it, understands it. Connect to verse 30. There is no wisdom or understanding or counsel against the Lord. Right? So that man who hardens his face, right, who thinks he has wisdom, who thinks he has understanding, unless his way is established, and his way is established in the Lord, there's no wisdom or understanding there. It's not getting him anywhere. Verse 31, the horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance is from the Lord. Right? The horse, the horse being human wisdom, right? Our wisdom, we get it ready. We do all that we know. We learn as much as we can. We get the horse ready, but the battle belongs to the Lord, right? Deliverance is from the Lord. But it does say we've got to get our horse ready. We got to be prepared for the battle. We got to be prepared for the spiritual battle. Our horse is ready. And then we lean on the Lord, and he delivers the outcome. All right, that's chapter 21. Just a couple of summary statements just to remind you of some things. The first thing, right, all the way back to the first verse, right? Your heart is in God's hand, directing his blessings to other people, if you allow it. If you allow your heart to be moved by God, your heart's in his hand and he's directing his blessings to other people. And then this whole thing about to the pure, all things are pure. I think we need to rethink our thinking about how we respond to the world, how we think about the world, and how we see God and then represent God to the world. Are we representing God to the world, or are we just reflecting the world back to the world? And then that crazy verse 21, life, righteousness, and honor, right? The ultimate rewards of following these proverbs, of following Christ, is life, righteousness, justice, and honor, glory. That's all I had. Any other thoughts? All right, let's move into prayer requests. Is Hugh there?
He is not.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm doing prayer requests then. I better pay attention.
Recording.
Thanks. Turn off the recording, adjust my papers. All right, so first